Crispy Bomb, we have to get into this Variety article. Now, I have the Variety article, but I also am going to use an article that was posted by Jez Corden of Windows Central, one half of the Xbox 2 podcast with Randall Thor. This comes the way of windowscentral.com/gaming. And he goes on to say, and I say he, Jez Corden goes on to say, Microsoft triples down on Xbox hardware's commitment while also teasing first-party gaming handhelds. But will it actually happen? Well, that's a good question. We're going to try and break that down here. In the subcategory, Jez goes on to say, very pointedly, I might add, the rumors of Xbox's first imposed demise have been greatly exaggerated after Xbox president Sarah Bond took to Variety to reiterate the firm's commitment on its gaming's hardware. So I have what she said in front of me, and this is just one of many quotes. So, folks, it's a long article. I've included all of them. The Variety article, I included the first topic that we talked about, an article there, as well, of course, as Jez Corden's, which I just added moments ago. But this is the direct quote from Sarah Bond while she was being interviewed by Variety. And Sarah goes on to say, we are 100% looking at making things in the future. We have our next-gen hardware currently in development. We've been looking at prototyping and designing. We have a partnership we've announced with AMD around it, so that is coming. What we saw here was an opportunity, while she's referring to the handhelds, what we saw here was an opportunity to innovate in a way and bring gamers another choice. In addition to our own next generation hardware, we are always listening to what the players and the creators want. When there is a demand for innovation, we are going to build it. Now, Fuzzy and Crispy, and I'm going to go to Crispy first on this. Again, if you just look back at the last 4 weekends, the first weekend that I'm referring to was the backlash for the $10 price increase, which I still gives Microsoft smoke for. I think it was the wrong time. I think it was $5 too much in my personal opinion, but it's the smoke that they got was righteous and well-deserved. Weekend number 2 came the way of getting out of hardware. Oh no! Xbox is dead for the 715th time in the last 10 years. Okay, fine. And then, of course, the third weekend, and then this weekend, there wasn't any negativity except for the POSs of PlayStation Nation, you know, the toxic MFs that I'm talking about that wanted to ruin Xbox gamers' fun with this not being an Xbox and this not playing all the games and blah, blah, blah. We talked about that already. But I think that when you look back, Crispy, to, I believe it was on Wednesday, she was interviewed by ABC News, where she brought a reporter to Seattle, and they talked about the Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X. The reporter got some hands-on time with it, right? We saw that in the interview. And Sarah took this reporter to a place where they are currently prototyping and testing consoles with an S. But then they doubled, well, according to the article with Jez Corden, tripled down on the fact that they are making hardware. And I really do think that these pair of interviews, one from ABC and one from Variety, were in conjunction with what happened a couple of weeks ago, where on a Sunday, someone from Xbox had to come out and be like, listen, these are all fabricated lies. We are making hardware, and that's it, right? It was a very short and sweet statement. But again, I don't know how many more times they have to do this. I don't think that they do. I think that, yes, there are going to be OEM hardware We just saw a pair of them released last Thursday. Like Fuzzy Belvedere just said, there is one expected in holiday of next year for this box underneath the TV. I think it's going to be a Asus. Personally, I don't know that for sure, but that's just my take on it. But Xbox produced hardware is rumored to be coming in two forms, and it's been confirmed that they're working on hardware, next generation hardware. Let's get your thoughts on the triple downing on this.
It's just funny that we have to still talk about this in some way, shape, or form. And I'm sure Microsoft Xbox is just sitting there like, dude, like, how many times do we have to say this? I mean, the thing you got to look at is they even went further and with the launch, talked about these things on ABC. I think it was Good Morning America. And it's just like, they feel like they don't want people to think that they're going out because other people are just making up this stuff and saying things that, are half-hearted lies, if anything, attributing, different things to the reasons why. It's a lot of jumping through hoops, a lot of goalposts moving. And then, Microsoft Xbox literally tells you, no, we're making hardware. Like, relax. Are they going to do different things? They're trying to innovate. She told you that. Okay. We've been talking about how they're going to try to innovate. All right. This is the part of the reasons why you might want the Ally. So if you're looking at the next generation, you got to realize that what they're doing is going to be different than any other generation. And clearly they're doing it differently. So why would they show where they're doing the development and all these other things if they're not making the console? I mean, just think about this for a second. How much was that 3D printer probably? Because when they showed that thing, I was like, I have never seen a 3D printer like that. So the investment involved in doing these innovations is astronomical. And we always said that Microsoft loves to do R&D. They want you to have a Windows like device under your TV that is a console first, and they're really getting so close to it. And it starts with the Ally and the abilities that they're going to implement in there. So I mean, they shouldn't have to say anything anymore, but I feel like next weekend it'll be and they'll figure out some other way to flip it over and say, oh, there's no bugs there. There's no the rock is got nothing under it. Xbox is dead and there's no console coming out and this and that. They are clearly invested in doing something that they believe could maybe change the perception of people have and saying, Xbox is irrelevant, because there's a lot of people that have that perception, regardless of how we feel in the chat on this panel. The fact is that there are some casuals that act like it doesn't exist because all they see is people talk about PlayStation. So if they have something that's truly innovative that allows you to do the things that they're kind of showing you with the Ally, that they could go and say, this is a really good reason to come join us on Xbox. Yeah. And it's really going to start with their own hardware thing is going to be where they've worked out the kinks with these, second parties that I would call them. And they work out these kinks to develop their own box. And I think that's what we're seeing. It seems like it's going that way. And I look forward to it because we really haven't had a ton of innovation other than like 4K and the FPS is going up and stuff like that. And then, like if you want to talk about how Game Pass has changed the industry or something like that. So like to really have that difference for a reason to buy an Xbox, I think that's what they're going for.
And it makes perfect sense. Again, I know that, shout out to Ray Chi in the chat, says, there is, look, if you don't trust Microsoft or specifically Xbox, and you have a reason that you, kind sir or madam, feel, then that's how you feel. I'm not going to tell you how to feel. If you have a mistrust for them or distrust because they said they were working on something and they canceled it, like a game, or they closed one of your favorite studios, listen, that those are your feelings, and you should spend your money accordingly. But Fuzzy, I have a quote here from Jez that I want to read. I want to give some of my personal context as to why I believe there is going to be additional hardware, even past the next generation, which again is apparently and supposedly releasing in 2027 with their own dedicated hardware. In the article, Jez Corden says, I think Sarah Bond's comments about hardware can still be taken as cautionary if you were a concerned Xbox customer. Microsoft has been pretty flaky on supporting its consumer products over the years, eager to cut and run at the first sign of trouble or real competition. Now, that's where I'm going to pause because I want to give my own thoughts on this. So, folks, look, you've heard me say this, and I really believe in my heart of hearts that this is the de facto reason why there's going to be Xbox hardware. So check this out. And again, I don't have a business degree. Folks, this is just common sense. If we are going to be fair, right, because we don't know the official number, let's just say, for shits and giggles, Fuzzy, that Xbox Game Pass has 40 million subscribers. Now, could that have taken a hit after the price increase? Sure. A lot of people left. A lot of people. Did 1 million leave? Did 2 million leave? Did 5 million walk off the page? I don't know. Again, I don't agree with the $10 increase, but for me, as the consumer who buys a lot of games, the value is still there. And I've told you this before, as long as I could find an alternative way legally to pay for these 3-month cards, I will go out of my way and do my due diligence as a good consumer. But rounding and circling the wagons back to my point is, if 10 of those 40 million subscribers are on PC, right? And we're being fair here with the numbers. We're not over exaggerating. If there are 30 million subscribers left on console, and what consoles would they be, Fuzzy? Well, that would be the Xbox One and the Xbox One X and S, or your series consoles, right? Mm-hmm. That's where you're playing Xbox Game Pass. If they were not to make hardware, their own dedicated hardware, where they're getting all of these subscription services, which we know that last, not quarter, but their last fiscal report, they made over $5 billion in Xbox Game Pass, and they spent $1 billion, which, again, no mathematician here, folks, that's a $4 billion profit. Yeah. So, again, if we're being fair, if you want to give them the smoke, that's great, not a problem. Mm-hmm. But to suggest that there's not going to be hardware, what do you do with the other 30 million subscribers? They're all going to move to PC? Of course they're not. They're going to stay where they are then. So it doesn't make any sense. But I want to get your thoughts on the tripling down of Xbox hardware from the New Variety article with Sarah Bond.
Well, one thing I do want to say first, it almost feels like people keep on repeating the same thing, hoping that at some point it becomes true. Whether it's the Xbox dead, Xbox not making hardware anymore. It seems like there's a segment of the community they believe it so deeply that they continue to say it no matter what Xbox says. They could come out, Xbox could have a product announcement or reassurance announcement every other day, and people would be like, that's still not enough. I don't trust them. And I get it. A lot of things have changed from the beginning of Xbox One up to today. And some of that mistrust is warranted. But at this point, to what you just said, Boom, I think they would have a hard time still bringing in the profit numbers that they're bringing if they were to kiss off hardware altogether. Now, could they still partner just like what they did with the handheld with his Zeus or something like that? Sure. But I still think at least, and I always try to look at things from a pessimistic standpoint. I would say if we're going to take that stance, then this might be their last piece of first party hardware. I don't think it is, but depending on how that launch goes and the adoption rate versus like the current Xbox One owners that are still out there that haven't upgraded to the series consoles and those that have the series consoles, depending on how fast of an adoption rate you get from that group over to whatever the next generation Xbox is, could help determine whether that's the last of the first party hardware. And honestly, who knows in 5 or 10 years if consoles are still the go-to or the de facto way to play games. Like I still envision within like the next 10 years, console hardware will be no more than something the size of your controller with all the hardware that's in like the Series X or an S able to be squeezed into these things. And sure, you might pay 150 for that controller, but you have everything you need. Hopefully, they have all of the thumbsticks at that point. But I don't know what the future holds as far as a under the TV box. Things are getting smaller and smaller. Companies are leaning more and more towards cloud, which yes, I know that that excludes a lot of people that don't have the best internet experience at the moment. Um, but the tech is getting better and better. Where before, where if you had like a 25 megabit up and down internet speed, which I'll be frank, is dog poop at this point, but that's sometimes the only option out there. There are some streaming services that are optimized to work well on those. So, sure, the graphic might not be as crystal clear or sharp, but it's still playable with minimal lag. Now, I wouldn't suggest that for playing like an Apex Legends or Call of Duty Online or anything, but if you're playing a single player game, it should be substantial enough to be able to get through it enjoyably. But I think as far as the options when it comes to Xbox, I don't think that they're going to completely step away from hardware. I think the big thing now is going to be that they're going to move more towards this blurred line between PC and console as far as a hybrid. Now, what does that mean for our old library? Well, we talked about potential emulation and so forth. And I know there were a few in the chat that were talking about x86. Well, the console and the PC are both x86, but to what I from what I've heard from those in the know, as far as developers and such, it is a difference of limitations where some of the options that we would love to have, like the POV sliders or certain other options as far as the level of detail and things, those are usually locked away when you make the build for a console versus a PC. PC, you have to basically make it not necessarily optimized, but playable on a wider variety of hardware, while the console is just basically these limited specs, maybe a previous gen and current gen, which aren't too far different. Just the memory allocation works a little bit differently. But all in all, emulation is going to be one of those things that I could see moving forward to take care of the back end of the catalog. But they still want to make sure that they have the easiest way to reach a customer base to monetize them. That's going to be the biggest thing that makes sense. Like looking back at other failed Microsoft hardware, whether you want to call the Zoom that or look at their Windows Phone, the biggest problem was the store because they couldn't convince app developers fast enough that it was worthwhile or worth the money making an app specifically for the Windows Store as opposed to the App Store on iOS. That was their drawback for not really doubling down and leveraging their command on the PC market space and trying to use that same domination in the phone space. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe it's great that Windows Phone failed, so that way Android could take a bigger chunk and Apple could flourish, type of deal. But we'll see how that goes in the future. But from a standpoint of at least from consoles, by them opening up the door to Steam, GOG, and Epic and other stores, I think that's one their way of allowing a change in how we look at how we purchase games. So that way they're not the big bag Microsoft like they've been looked at in the past, although people still continue to think like they're operating in the same way that under Bill Gates type of deal. But all in all, they're opening up stores or opening up their platform to other stores. They're making it so that they can still reach their current customer base and maybe persuade somebody that was on Steam to take a look at what they have to offer. Because big innovation, and some have also mentioned in the chat, was quick resume. That's something that maybe we'll see in Windows 12 as a new PC feature kind of thing. But in the grand scheme of things, that was their big console contribution this gen. And we'll probably see some form of that next gen when it comes to that PC console hybrid, or through Windows 12 for everybody else that wants to just stay on PCs as far as gaming. But all in all, I'm pretty confident that they're going to make at least this next generation of hardware. Beyond that, I can't predict that. If I could, I would be playing the lottery and probably wouldn't be podcasting at this point. But I would say this much: expect that there's going to be hardware. I almost am expecting that there's going to be partner hardware, much like the Asus handheld, and that might be the best because that will give us a better range of options. Like if you could have it where you could play on a handheld or play on the next console that's a first party made thing. It's got a lot of bells and whistles. It's under your TV for $700, let's just say. But Asus or Alienware makes one that has more memory, a little bit better operating speed, a little bit better chipset, more allocation to video, the inboard or onboard video card memory. Then that might be the way to go, and you might have to spend $1,000. So options are going to be a good thing. So if they do make third-party, devices, we'll see if that is a benefit. But in the grand scheme of things, they're going to want to still reach the customer, be able to get you to buy those microtransactions, season passes, or subscriptions to Game Pass and such. And the best way for them to do that is to have their own hardware. Look at things like Luna. Look at things like Stadia. Not having hardware does limit your reach. Sure, you could put, I guess, a Game Pass on PlayStation and Nintendo at that point if you're not making hardware, but then you're relying on that third party to open up their doors to your subscription. We'll see how it goes, but I would say if I was a betting man, next generation hardware is at least a guarantee. Beyond that, we'll see how it's adopted and go from there.